Hi, thanks for having me today. Yes, my name is Florence Chang. So I work with the Division of Student Success and work closely with Wendy Spalding as well as our alternative education consultants. So I'll be reviewing information today around setting up and defining an alternative education program, as well as the required ILPA requirements for students who are enrolled in these programs. So we're first going to talk about the definition of an on-site and off-site alternative education program. Spend some time, how do you define those? And then talk about the ILPA, the Required Individual Learning Plan Addendum for students who are enrolled greater than 10 school days, 10 consecutive school days in an AEP. There is a requirement for that for all of these students, with the exception of students with a disability. So, definition of an offsite AEP. An offsite AEP is a program that's located in a separate and dedicated program facility not located within an existing A1 school. So these can be either district operated or KSIS funded. So those are the ones that serve state agencies children. So your district operated programs would be an A5 program. Your state agency funded would be A6. And then there are some blended programs that serve both groups of students. That would be a designation of A6 for reporting services. There is some gray area here. So districts do have discretion of determining when the program is maybe on the same campus of an A1, but in a separate building. Our team, in particular, Wendy, works frequently with districts that are in this gray area and have these programs on a case-by-case basis to figure out what is the most appropriate designation for that. So in terms of setting it up, the Infinite Campus information is on this slide. You would be under the school information in the tool search. And then we do have data standards that are available, and it's also referenced at the end here in the resource section. I'd refer to those frequently. They have the step-by-step screenshots. So this is just the one screenshot that shows, as you have designated an offsite AEP in your district, you want to make sure that it has a separate location number completely. And then under type, it needs to be designated as an alternative education school. And then moreover, have that state classification. So this is where like A5 or A6 would be designated. The students do need to be withdrawn from their A1 school and enrolled in their A5 or A6 program. And any student enrolled in an alternative education program, they are tracked just like students in the A1 program. So attendance is tracked, behavior, grades, demographics, and so on. Okay, that was your offsite program. Your onsite program is a program that's located within an A1 school. And with your on-site programs, you have to designate the courses that these students are enrolled in as AEP courses. So we're going to show you that in a second. But that is a key difference between an on-site and off-site program, is this course section designation. So programs that are located in the A1 school, and serving the same grade levels, those would be on-site. Now, if you have a program that is serving different grade levels, you can choose to designate the program as an off-site or an on-site program. Okay, on this slide, you will see how do you designate that the course section is an alternative education program course. So on the tool search in Infinite Campus, you'd be looking for section information, and under the highlighted yellow on this slide, under special type, This course must be marked as an O2 alternative classroom for each content class offered to students. And then the students placed in these on-site programs should be assigned to these specific course sections. And this is without this designation, we at KDE cannot see that this is an alternative education program course. So it's very critical to mark these. And we do have specific information in these documents if you need more information on how to set those up. Okay, so that kind of covers the information on just designating your offsite and onsite program. We're moving towards now the long-term placement, and when students are in an alternative education program for long-term, which is defined as 10 consecutive days, then they are required to have an ILPA, an individual learning plan addendum, that has to be completed within 20 school days. With the exception, as I mentioned earlier, for students with an IEP. If the students have an IEP, they are not required to do this ILPA, but you can if you would like to. And students with a 504 plan that are assigned to an alternative education program for at least 10 consecutive days, they will still need to do an ILPA. So the components of an ILPA, it is an action plan that helps the student set up their goals while they're enrolled and then during their tenure in the education program, and addresses their unique needs. And upon entry and exit, it is an addendum to the ILP, which they should have already if they have set that up at their previous school. And it can be an additional resource to meet the needs of students enrolled in AEPs for students with disabilities. And in order to complete this, you will need to follow the specific steps in terms of outlining the support for academic and behavior needs, criteria for reentry to the traditional program, and set up the provisions for how you're going to review student progress. A lot of that information is typically set up in an AEP like handbook or school handbook, program handbook. So a lot of those may be set up in there, and then this is what you would follow as you complete each student's ILPA. And of course, there's multiple things and items that would be used to inform the ILPA. So prior to setting up an ILPA for a student, there's multiple pieces to be aware of: data collection, the student background and goals, ILPs, previous ILPs, the PBIS foundation for the program, and then progress monitoring. So as mentioned, just to emphasize, students are required to have an ILPA if they've been enrolled in the program at least 10 school days. And the ILPA is a great resource for students who also have an IEP, and then it can accompany that. And again, Program 504 students still have to have an ILPA. Okay, so high quality ILPA, how do we set that up and document that? So the first thing to think about is your transition team members that make up the committee and the stakeholder group involved in working on the ILPA. And this is documented in Infinite Campus. So you'll be thinking about who is the team that makes that up. This is typically somebody from both the alternative education program as well as the program they're coming from or their school they're coming from. You'll have a representative from each of those locations, and then you'll have typically a teacher in the alternative education program, the caregiver, family or legal guardian, possibly a mental health professional or counselor, and then the student themselves if it is developmentally appropriate. In terms of how to document the ILPA team, the team member data will populate the information within the ILPA. So in terms of staff will be available if you use, there's two options, but if it's an existing staff member of the district, you can find and link the new team member option, and that'll be a drop down based on your district assignments for that staff member. And then you will also typically need to enter a new team members for anyone who's outside of a district assignment. The components of an ILPA will typically have behavior and academic goals for everyone. For older secondary students, possibly college and career readiness goals. And you'll be looking at a variety of different documents in order to create this ILPA. So as noted on the slide, students from AEPs who are enrolled in AEPs are typically very transient. They have been to multiple schools or programs. And so having this documentation is very helpful to all the adults who are working with the students. The AEP team has set up, has some really great resources on the specifics of setting up your ILPA in Infinite Campus. This is a good time of year to kind of revisit your ILPA setup. So there's a setup document, and that helps you think about template banks, which a lot of people may not be aware of or may not have utilized. But basically what that helps with is if you have some things that you want to automate to like a drop down or things that you have that are consistent across the program, you can create a template bank, and that helps from re-entering things manually. So there's a great setup document for that. And you do have to have that appropriate access granted by your local district. Template banks, so they are available when you look at Infinite Campus. If the box has a little paper symbol, it indicates that there could be a template bank. And the following fields are typical ones that districts may have template banks or local programs may have set up. So your criteria for re-enrollment, student strengths, student needs, and goals and objectives. As you start thinking about your ILPA setup and the form itself, this is an outline that shows each editor, what they can actually need to navigate through and what they'll need to be populating. And as these different sections of the ILPA are saved, they will be displayed in bold. So to create a new ILPA, you'll go into the tool, search ILPA documents, create a new document called KY-ILPA, and the first screen you'll look at is just the overall start and end date for that student. So you'll put in the relevant dates for the placement. A lot of times you don't know necessarily the anticipated date of transition. So the best practice in this case is just to enter a date, an end date of 1 year from the enrollment date. And then when they actually transition out, you can go back and change that. And of course, all the reason for placement and things like that, that will vary greatly by the purpose of your alternative education program. On the ILPA, the demographics section of the ILPA will automatically populate if you hit the refresh student information button that comes from the student's census record. Similarly, for household information, the guardian information, if you hit the refresh guardian information, that will populate from the student's household record. So again, this all helps with, not having to re-enter it twice, and then also data quality and consistency. District school information that's listed on the ILPA, you can select this from a drop-down list if it's in Kentucky and where the student is transitioning from. And this will also auto-populate if the student's coming from a school within the same district. And then finally, the transition information editor, that has that anticipated date of transition. And you'll remember that auto-populates from that initial screen where you filled that out with the plan information. This section provides an overview of the criteria necessary for the student to meet their transition goals. And again, transition goals and the criteria are vastly different from program to program. So again, this is where when I talked about the template banks, this is an example of a template bank for the criteria piece. So typically your criteria for re-enrollment may be very similar across your program. So in this particular case, this is a program where here is their academic criteria for re-enrollment. So in their template, they've said they must show respectful responses to authority, demonstrate a consistent ability to follow school rules, passing all classes 70% or higher, be on grade level with credits, and have complete attendance. So that is a typical way somebody might use the template bank to articulate and describe the criteria. Then the next section of the ILPA setup would be what records were reviewed and are available. And so this is already in Infinite Campus. You just click on the boxes and review and select all the documents that were available upon enrollment. If the student has an IELP, individual learning plan, individual education plan, all of those previous plans, of course, it is best practice to review all of those prior to completing an ILPA. And that just gives you the whole picture. And again, a lot of these kids have been very transient and may not have many adults that know them well. So as you can see their record of history, that helps to get to know that individual kiddo. The ILPA also gives you an opportunity to describe that student's strengths and their academic needs. This is a very rich section of the ILPA. When I've read them, gives a really a good profile of what to know about this student. And we very much encourage the a rich description of strengths for these students, just so if they're co-creating this with you, they can help you define what they think their strengths are. And this is a section that helps then set up areas of growth or goals as you get into the goals section. So yeah, these are some of the different areas that you may be thinking about as you're thinking about strengths and needs. So it's not only your academic and behavior, but it can be social and emotional. And again, we encourage, if it's appropriate for the student, to be part of the ILPA creation so they can also reflect on themselves and help define how they want to see their strengths and where do they see their needs. And that feeds right into the goals and objectives. So with goals and objectives, you now have all of this rich information, right? You've got the previous records, you've got the current assessments of the student, and then you have your team. This is then how you start thinking about what are the goals that you want to set and describe in the ILPAs. It does not have to be all academic or behavior related. There can be additional goals like college and career readiness and social emotional goals. You may have had a template bank that you've built for these, but they do need to be measurable, and the goals can have multiple ways, multiple objectives and measures. This is a great example of a template that has been set. So this is one around attendance. And for this particular example, they have a behavior goal around attendance that is be on time and attend school daily. So easily to measure and easy to track. And then they have objectives that the attendance for this particular kid is not just coming to school every day, but it's engaging and participating. So they have that described here in their ILPA. Okay, so now you've got your ILPA, your goals and objectives, everything laid out. Then you want to make sure that you are documenting the team meetings. So when the team comes together to review the progress, that there is an option in Infinite Campus to document the meeting time and date. And that, again, just helps with progress monitoring. And also if there's transition in the future for that student, you know, just to see all the different meetings that have occurred. Okay, cannot emphasize this enough. It is so important as you work on the ILPA to lock it. So once you've got that initial ILPA set, after that first 20 days, it has to be done. Make sure to click on lock on Infinite Campus. This is probably the number one thing that people forget to do is they leave it unlocked because they think of it as a living document, which totally it is, but you can lock and unlock as needed. But as you finish until the next meeting, we encourage just lock it because that designates it as complete for regulation purposes and meeting the requirements of the statute. So when we do monitoring, we run a report to see how many ILPAs were needed to be completed and how many actually were completed. And completed is defined as locked. So please double check that you have locked your ILPAs after every meeting with the student. And it also does help with records transfer. So it won't transfer unless you have that locked. Okay, and then the last thing you can do after you have set up your ILPA is to create documentation for progress monitoring. So under ILPA documents, there is a create new document and you can create a new progress report. This helps you document whether the goals and objectives that you said you were going to work on, how is that progress, and do you need to adjust the ILPA based on the metrics that you're collecting for that student. So that's that plan, act, do, plan, act, review, progress kind of cycle. So we encourage that best practice for every student to progress monitor. And many times we've seen many programs that involve the students in this as well. So they can use this as a reflection process. These are some amazing resources that the AEP team has created. So I know I went through that pretty quickly, and there's a lot of step-by-step screenshots within Infinite Campus that are covered in these documents. And then I also encourage you to reach out to our lead contact, which is Letitia Porter or Wendy Spalding, for technical assistance on Infinite Campus. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
Thank you. Great presentation, Florence. Appreciate you stepping in for Wendy today. Sure. We do have just a few questions, and some of them have already been answered. So that might help us both out, right?
Yeah.
So for an AEP, would an alternative virtual setting be considered off or on-site? And the answer that's out there is most virtual programs are set up on-site with the A1 school of the students served. However, this is a district-based decision. Do you want to add anything to that?
That is a wonderful question. We have seen it exponentially grow in the field post-COVID. I don't know if Josh Whitlow is still on and has anything to add to this, but yes, district decision, how they handle this. And typically we have seen the programs that we've seen with the virtual component, they have still included it as an on-site or off-site program. It depends on the program itself. So if it's an on-site program with a virtual component or an off-site program with a virtual component, they've kept that in the designation of on-site or off-site, not necessarily A8, which is a whole separate designation. And I think there's still district discretion on creating those A8 programs versus an A5 or A6.
All right, next question was, are districts using A5 for the KDEC homeschooling? And the response response out there is homeschooling is not considered an AEP, alternative.
Mm-hmm.
So anything you want to add to that one?
Nope, that's it. Homeschooling is not AEP.
Okay, so the last one, I have no answers for you on this one, so you're on your own here.
Okay.
When you set up a template blank, does that limit what you can add? Can you modify slightly for some students?
I believe you can. I'll double check that with Wendy, but I think you can set that up and still do some modifications as needed. It just helps with having to retype something over and over again. We'll double check that with Wendy just to make sure that capability is still there.
Yeah, whoever asked that question, or if you have interest in that question, just watch for the Q&A. Lisa may know the answer because I see she's camera on.
The template bank does not put anything into the field unless you click it and choose an option. Once it's entered in there, you can type over the top of it. So it is just pre-filling that box for you, and you can modify it after you pull it in, or you can just type whatever you want to and not use the template. So it's all throughout campus. They're all over the place.
It's a big time saver. So I would definitely encourage you to use that feature if you haven't, or try it. It doesn't hurt to try it. So
absolutely.